Hey, I'm Caleb, member of the Teenage Advisory Board with the Howard County Library System, and in this tutorial I will teach you the intro to programming and Python, specifically math operators. I'm also partnered with the Centennial High School Pioneers, a school-based programming club. Just a disclaimer, this tutorial is meant for those who understand adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and exponents, and have watched the previous two videos in this Intro to Programming and Python series. Alright, let's get started with arithmetic operators. These operators are just like operators in math. If we wanted to add 3 and 5 and print a sum, we would use the print statements and do 3, and then plus sign, and then 5. This expression right here will evaluate to 8, and the statement will print 8. So if we run the code, you get 8 printed. For subtraction, we use the dash symbol. For multiplication, we use the asterisk. For division, we use the slash. And for exponentiation, we use 2 asterisks. Now here, we're taking 5 and raising it to the third power, meaning doing 5 times 5 times 5. So if we run the code, we can see 3 plus 5, we get 8. 5 minus 3, we get 2. 5 times 3, we get 15. 5 divided by 3, we get 1.6666. And 5 to the third, we get 125. Now, if you're familiar with some other programming languages, you may realize that something is a bit different about the result for the division, right here. That the division returned a float, even when the operands are both integers. So in Python, all expressions using the division operator will be returned as float. These operators can be combined and used together, and the order of operation can be specified with parentheses. For example, if we wanted to do 2 times 4 plus 7, and then print that result, we would do 2 times 4, and then we would just simply add the operator plus 7, like that. So Python follows the order of operation, meaning it does multiplication and division first, and then it does addition and subtraction, and it goes left to right. So it will do 2 times 4 plus first, and you would get 8. And then you'd add 7, that's 15. So it will print 15, just like that. However, if you wanted to do 4 plus 7 first, then you would use parentheses to specify that you want that to happen first. For example, just like that, you put a parentheses and you wrap around 4 plus 7. So then Python is going to do 4 plus 7 first to get 11, and then multiply that by 2 to get 22. And if we run it as expected, we get 22. Alright, I have a little practice problem for you. Using what you just learned, create a program that prints out the result of this math expression right here. Note that you don't actually need to solve it by yourself. You can just translate this expression into Python math syntax that we just went over and see what value it prints using the print statement. The answer will be revealed at the end of this tutorial. Also, don't forget your order of operations. Now let's go on into the modulus operator and the floor division operator. So the modulus operator is a percentage sign. So what that does, it divides it and then takes the remainder of it and returns it. So this is basically saying, what is the remainder when 5 is divided by 3? And we know that that is 2. So if we print it, we get 2 right here. And for floor division, that is returning the quotient of a division. So if we do 5 and then 2 backslashes, sorry, forward slashes, and then 3, and then if we run it, we get 1 because the quotient of when 5 is divided by 3 is equal to 1. So the quotient, you can basically think of it as you're dividing it, but you just take the integer part. Now remember that these operators only work on numerical types. So you cannot divide a string by a list or anything like that. So numerical types are integers and floats. So only they work on these arithmetic operators. Now let's talk about assignment operators. Assignment operators are shortcuts that help programmers change the value of a variable faster. Let's declare a variable called myvar and set it to 1. If we want to increase the stored value of myvar by 1, we can use the assignment operator, which is plus equals 1. What this does is it increases, which is a plus sign, the currently stored value in myvar by 1. So let's see what the value for myvar is now. So we see 2. So at first it was assigned to 1. However, this incremented the stored value in myvar by 1. Hence, now it has the value of 2. Okay, what if we want to bring that back down? We have the minus equals operator. And then if we print it again, now we're back to 1. So these are the basic assignment operators, and there's some more that uses the arithmetic operators that we learned up here. So we could multiply by 5, we could divide by 7, and we could even use the modulus operator and then store the remainder when it's divided by, for example, 9. So these are the basics of assignment operators, and now let's learn about typecasting. So typecasting is the process of changing the data type of a variable or a data. Let me show you what I mean. If we have a float and we want to store that value but as an integer, we can use the integer typecasting function, which is int. So the object that is passed into this function will return as an integer with the integer data type. So if we assign a to int and then pass in a, let's see what a is now. As you can see, a is no longer 4.23948, but this function has turned it into an integer, meaning it only kept that integer part, so it removed the decimal point. And now it's just storing 4, and as we printed a, we get 4. There's another typecasting function called float. It turns in whatever is passed in into a float. So if you have an integer variable b, and then if we pass b into float, this whole thing will return b as a float. Let's store it in b and print it. Run the code, and we can see that b is no longer just 5, but it has been turned into a float by adding 0.0, just like that. The last typecasting function that I want to introduce is a string typecasting function. Okay, I'll declare variable c, that's some float, and let's change the data type of c into string. Okay, and then let's print it. If we run the code, we get 4.24, which is the same thing as what we assigned. how do we know that this thing has actually been turned into a string and it's not actually hasn't stayed as a float? This brings me to a useful function called type. So it takes in an object and it returns the data type of that object. So if we want to know the data type of C, we would do print and then type C. This invocation of the type function will return the data type of C, and we're going to print it. And as we can see, we get class string. That means C is indeed the string data type. Now, typecasting becomes very useful with inputs because the input function, it keeps all the inputs as strings, no matter the data type of the input. So if the user inputs an integer, float, or a boolean, it still stores it as a string. For example, enter integer. Let's store this input into this variable d. And let's print the type of d to see what type it is being stored as. So we get enter integer. I'm going to enter 5. And now we see that this 5 has been stored into d as a string. So there are times that we will want to store it as an integer. So for that, we would use the typecasting function int, which takes this input, turns it into an integer, and stores it in d. So now if we run the code and check the type of d, 34, and now we see that it is indeed stored as an integer. Just to clarify, these typecasting functions, they require that their arguments are numerical types. So the typecasting functions I'm talking about is int and float. These two functions need to have numerical typed arguments, meaning integers or floats. They cannot turn in strings or lists or other data types into integers and floats. Oh, and for the inputs, you can typecast the inputs using these other typecasting functions as well, like float and string. All right. Well, that's it for math operators, assignment operators, and typecasting in Python. The answer for the practice problem was 3. If you didn't get it correctly, I encourage you to go back and review the last tutorial or the beginning part of this tutorial. And please like and subscribe on YouTube. And feel free to follow our Instagram, which is chspyoneers, spelled with a Y. And you can also visit our website. The link should be attached to this video. You can always email our club for any questions. So thanks for watching and tune in for next time.